Alright, so show of hands who likes defending stuff. Get out. Who likes breaking stuff?
Get out.
Now usually when we break stuff, we're exploiting a bug, right? Here we're not exploiting a bug, but we're going to be breaking all sorts of shit. Who recognizes this diagram? Who ever thought this would be useful to understand? I'm really surprised. You knew more than I did. So this is how we're all taught to do networking. We're taught that you have a layer 7, which is wrapped inside of layer 6, which is wrapped inside of layer 5, and then it goes all the way down to the bottom at layer 1. And we're taught to believe that each layer will properly deliver frames that came from the last one. And we believe this because every time we get a packet, the checksums make sure that there's no damage in it. And the only exceptions we see to this are when we intentionally turn checksumming on. But it turns out that checksumming is only intended to prevent against accidental error. And what I'm about to present today is a remote exploit for layer 1 that exploits the physical medium of the wireless network in order to inject a raw packet, a raw frame. There is no software bug in the stack that we can blame. There is no hardware bug in the receiver that we can blame. This exploit is standard compliant and portable to almost every wireless networking protocol that includes a variable length field and lacks cryptography. Not that any of us would know where to find any of those.
There's 6.
And as I go through these slides, I want you to think back to Atlas's talk on layer 1. And whatever pieces of that look foreign to you, I want you to realize that foreignness of it, that lack of understanding of how layer 1 works, is just as much of a mistake and just as much of an absence as any misunderstanding about how layer 2 works. I think it was Bruce Potter who famously said, "For the love of God, learn how layer 2 works." Well, I'm saying now, for the love of God, learn how layer 1 works. Without further ado, here's a 5-layer exploit. Our situation is that Mallory wants to attack Bob, but Mallory has no radio. This is a radio exploit in which the attacker does not control the radio. All packets have to go through Alice. And Alice, for whatever reason, is filtering the exploit that Mallory wants to use. So if you've read Uninformed Volume 6, Article 2, when Johnny Cash, H.D. Moore, and Steve were presenting exploits for beacon frames and for probe responses, you can't really send a beacon frame or a probe response over the internet because they're unique to Wi-Fi. They don't fit within the IP space. But using packet and packet, you can. The other part is that this is for packet injection. So Mallory is going to send a specially crafted string anywhere within the packet as a whole. It can be in layer 7, it can be in any layer 7 protocol. I don't care which, so long as it's not encrypted and whatever obfuscation exists is reversible. What's going to happen is that by a radio error, this string will become a packet. Okay? So if you've ever done Wi-Fi injection and you had to load a special Wi-Fi driver in order to do this, I'm going to not only show you how to do it without a special driver, I'm going to show you how to do it in someone else's network. You can make a web page with JavaScript, and the JavaScript will cause Wi-Fi frames to be injected on the users of the web browser going to this page. And for Zigbee, it gets so simple that I can teach you the exploit here, and you can scribble it on a napkin before you leave. 4 zeros and an A7. Scribble that. This is the Shmoocon 2420. This is the Zigbee chip that we did the original exploit on. This is not a computer. There is nothing Turing complete in here. There is no program memory. There is no code. This is just a finite state machine and a bit of analog wizardry. All it does is load packets into a buffer. And we're going to exploit it, and not because of a hardware bug. So again, this is a remote 5-layer exploit. The string will become a packet, and the attacker does not have a radio. There were no USRPs used in this. There were no radios of any kind used in this except to verify the effect. The party playing the attacker only controls a string within a packet and does not have a radio. And almost all digital radios without cryptography and with variable frame lengths are vulnerable. This is what our exploit looks like on Zigbee, or IEEE 82.15.4. As you run through the packet, you have the preamble. This sets up the radio timing. Those are your 4 zeros. And then you have your sync field, which is your A7. That's your A7. Every packet begins with that at layer 1, but no packet sniffer will show that to you because the radio takes care of it. The radio lobs it off. The zeros aren't even interpreted as data, although I'll get back to that in a bit. And that italicized region, lower up, beginning with 0A, 01, 08, that is the packet that is injected. And you see before it, there are 4 zeros and an A7. That's all you need to do a Zigbee packet-to-packet injection. And it works. If you transmit that packet as a whole, the inner packet will fall through and be remotely injected. This is the OSI model exploited. I mean, every promise that an attacker can't jump from an inner field to an outer field has just been broken here. So please read the fucking paper. I did this work with Sergey Bratis, Ricky Melgares, Rebecca Shapiro, and Ryan Spears, and it just so happens that we're all here at Shmoocon. Team Appalachia. So let's get to how it works. This is a slide from, stolen from the lecture, but it was my own lecture, so that's okay. Michael and Osmond and I did this in real name character pages. And this slide depicts in marker what a packet looks like. It begins with the preamble, that's the zeros. Then there's the sync field, also called a starting frame delimiter. The preamble exists to set up the radio tuning so that it knows how fast each bit will be. And the sync field exists to mark the beginning of a packet. So that chip that I showed you, the microscope photo of a few slides back, the way that that receives is it just cycles all of the incoming bytes through a matching shift register. And when it sees 00A7, the end of that sequence, it snaps in, and then it looks at the very next byte, that's the length field. And that's how it knows how many bytes of data to load into the buffer. And when it finishes loading them, it raises a pin to tell the microcontroller, hey, we've got a packet waiting. Now, if there's any damage in the data section, we all know what happens, right? The CRC will be invalid. That's at the end. When that CRC is invalid, the packet gets explicitly dropped. And if it's explicitly dropped, well, we never see it, so the damage is something that we pretend doesn't happen. And it's something that we are told as layer 7 or layer 6, or even as layer 2 developers, to expect not to exist. There's another case, though, which is the case that I care about. If the sync field is damaged, the packet is not dropped. It won't count against your link quality statistics, because the radio never knew that a packet began. It thinks that it's still listening to background noise. Now, to someone who cares about performance, this is exactly the same as a dropped packet, right? Because the packet never arrived, maybe our statistics are a little bit off, but it's 1 in however many, so we don't care. But if it just so happens that an attacker puts another sync field inside of the data section, like 4 zeros and an A7, then the receiving radio latches at that point and thinks that the packet begins there, in attacker-controlled regions of the packet. So Mallory, when she crafts a packet like this, can take any old Zigbee packet, anything out of a packet sniffer, beginning with the length and ending with the valid checksum, and she can put 4 bytes of zeros and an A7 before it, and send that over the air, and about 1 time in 1,000, the sync field at the top, that first A7, will get damaged. And when that gets damaged, the inner packet and not the outer packet is returned. That is remote layer 1 frame injection. And you can do it if you know 4 zeros and an A7. Isn't that cool? And most importantly, it works. This highlighted region in the upper section, that's the inner packet the upper section are packets that are grabbing entire packets. On the inner section, we filter off the address so that the outer packet never shows up. And those two inner packets, those two that are highlighted in the lower section, those were remotely injected by our layer 1 exploit. And all this requires is that you control a long enough string inside of the packet itself. You need your packet length plus 5 bytes. Isn't that cool? So this is how it works in theory. In theory, you've got your OSI model, and you have individual packets, and you have these layers of separation. Right? We're told to respect and appreciate these layers of separation when we're learning networking, and then when we're relearning it because we learned how poorly we learned it the first time, we start finding all of these cross-layer interactions, right? We learned about SQL injection, and about how a software bug inside a SQL injection, a software bug inside of PHP can allow our SQL statements to be injected. Yeah. And we also learned about fail defenses, like simply doubling single quotes in SQL, right? And this fails when different character encodings are included or when extra escape characters exist. Right? And in each one of these cases, though, it's a software vulnerability. There are a few others that Sergey and I have been working on that are hardware vulnerabilities, which are in fact remotely exploitable. But this is even cooler because this is not an exploit of any particular implementation. I can't stand up here and say that you should buy Ember instead of Chipcon because Chipcon is vulnerable, or that you should buy Chipcon instead of Ember because Ember is vulnerable. Because this is unique to the way that the physical radio layer works itself. I can't even say use Wi-Fi instead of Zigbee because this also works on Wi-Fi. Rate shifting makes it terribly difficult to implement on 11G and the faster parts of 11B. But when you get to low data rates, this trick works. You can remotely inject a Wi-Fi frame. You can make an ISO image that when downloaded remotely injects beacon frames. Isn't that cool? So this is encapsulation in the textbook. This is how encapsulation works in the real world, in the presence of errors. Isn't that little thing so cute? Because the OSI model teaches us to plug together different complex pieces, right? We have all of these layers, and they're each very complicated, and they each have strange side effects. And we're taught that it's okay to have these layers beneath us that we don't trust, so long as things get filtered along the way, because we can trust the boundaries of separation between these layers of abstraction. But then we wind up building things like this and not even recognizing it.
But it worked.
If this had worked, it would have shipped. It's true. Raise your hand if you've seen something this ugly in the field. Oh. Things be changing. So this brings me to Bradis's law, that layers of abstraction become boundaries of complex. So the whole time that we've been making fun of the network engineers that don't know what goes on beneath the hood, the Java programmers that don't know what a TCP sequence number is, even though they've been writing TCP servers for years. We're guilty of the same thing because we as a profession have not been looking at layer 1 until very recently. Sergey had discovered this vulnerability, along with the rest of our team, in 2011. Sergey would know the exact date, but I believe it was mid-February. And it sat undiscovered between 1933 and then. There was exactly one piece of prior art, which I don't have time for in this lecture, but you will find if you read the fucking paper. It's called Packets and Packets, Orson Welles' in-band signaling attacks for modern radios.
That's awesome.
We managed to port this whole exploit, this whole method of breaking layer 1 for every form of unencrypted digital radio uses a trick that can be found in Orson Welles' 1938 War of the Worlds. And it's sat undiscovered until now. Except by Orson Welles. Some of the bitch beat me to my exploit by more than the invention of the computer. So that's how you break layer 1, and thank you kindly, and I'm happy to take questions from the audience.